we are having this session of two talks. The first one being the topic of the first talk is strengthening youth voice for just energy transition. Okay, and the speaker is Renee Magpantay-Tumaliuan. I'm sorry, excuse me for the pronunciation. I'm sure I must have gone wrong somewhere, but excuse the mistake. She currently works as program coordinator of FES Philippines. She coordinates projects relating to climate and energy, gender and development, labor migration, rural development, and local governance. Before joining FES in 2014, Renee spent 18 years in rural development work, specifically in the areas of participatory local governance, community organizing, organizational development and management, and human resource development. So now I invite Renee ma'am to take over the session and give us your valuable input. Thank you so much. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure you've been having a lot of insights in this past almost 2 days. Thank you very much for inviting me to discuss about our work in Reboot. Let me just first share my screen. Okay, can you see the screen properly? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm Rennie. I work for FES Philippines, and I particularly coordinate climate and energy projects of FES Philippines. Let me also first give you a glimpse of our energy context here in the Philippines. So the Philippines belong to the Pacific Ring of Fire. At least 20 typhoons visit us a year, and in between that, a lot of earthquakes also. There are at least 2 million Filipinos without access to 24 hours of electricity. Many of them don't even have electricity at all. Our current energy mix is dominantly composed of coal and only 24% renewables. Coal is mostly imported from Indonesia and Australia, and that is also why our electricity prices are among the highest in Southeast Asia. Of course, this is also because of uncompetitive market structures in the Philippines. There's a rapid growth in energy demand as expected until 2040 with 5% per year. And while the government declared a moratorium on building new coal power plants beyond projects that are already approved, during the COP26, our Minister of Energy did not include the clauses about ending all investments in new coal power generation projects when he signed the pledge about coal phase out. Our country aims to double the renewable capacity by 2030 and reduce energy intensity by 3% per year over 2005 to 2040. But there's still not really a lot of talk about going 100% renewables. There's also a current trend of corporate takeover of rural electric cooperatives, which is causing a lot of concern on democratization of energy in our country. So this is the context we are currently working with. And in the Philippines, FES Philippines, we are mainly working on these major themes. Just energy transition and sustainable cities and communities. Be catalyzed by strong social and political movements. That's why since 2015, our major strategy is the strengthening of social movements, and this entails human capital development development, model builds to building, policy development. In this area, there means some of them get a seat on the table, and there's a need to amplify the youth agenda in the just energy framework. So in 2016, we launched the Renewable Energy Bootcamp, or Reboot, which is a training program for young, proactive, and technically oriented renewable energy ambassadors. For batch 1 of Reboot, we have recently just graduated the batch 3 of Reboot. But for batch 1, all our participants had engineering background. So these are all tech people. But after our evaluation with the participants and with our consultants, we adjusted the criteria. So for batch 2 and batch 3 of Reboot, we have participants coming from diverse backgrounds, coming from design, those with social development background, those who are involved in finance and entrepreneurship, and those, of course, with engineering backgrounds. They undergo series of screening and interview because we can accommodate limited number of booth. We hope from the doors to develop knowledge and skills on renewable energies. We hope to improve their capacity to develop projects that respond to energy issues. We hope to provide technical application of knowledge and to create young RE ambassadors. We often receive feedback from participants that before power homes and buildings, but with Reboot, they were able to realize how renewable energy can really be applied to projects on livelihood, on education, or to have better living and working conditions for women. The program energy and immersion program in communities. Immersion is this is the experiential part of Reboot. The participants should stay in partner communities and to learn all concern and identify vendors. So political already includes finance mobilization and how to communicate with different stakeholders in implementing their projects. We also include movement building as part of the curriculum, where we give emphasis on the importance of working together and with other stakeholders to create more impact. And then a very important part of the training program also is self-awareness and self-care. I think this is one of the reasons why the participants are really enjoying the training program. And we also have very small mortality rate when it comes to the training participants. For the faculty of Reboot or resource persons, we reach out to our network and partners who are experts from different sectors like the academe, the business sector, government, and CSOs. For batch 3, we decided to form the advisory board, which is composed of 5 persons plus the secretariat. And the backgrounds of these advisory board members are also very diverse. One of them is from the social movement. One is an activist, environmental activist. One is from the business sector with expertise on RE policy and project development. and one from is a gender rights advocate. Of course, like many other projects, we experience a lot of challenges. First of the challenges from batch 1 to 3, there are so many topics and we have so little time. We have so limited time. We think that more than 6 clusters for the training program might be too much for the participants, because the participants we have are either young working people or young professionals or students who are in the 3rd or 4th years of college, and they are, some of them are also busy people. Second, we are also concerned about continued engagement with graduates. How do we monitor their progress after the training program? And then came the third one, the pandemic lockdown. Because with pandemic lockdown, we cannot do the usual training program that we have. The lockdown happened here in the Philippines just a week before they were supposed to go to the communities and immerse themselves with the communities. So what we did was these adjustments. First, we shifted to synchronous and asynchronous online methods. And then we also included community members or representatives as participants. For the community representatives as participants, we lifted the age limit. And then we also have remote mentoring and coaching. Our resource persons, the task of these resource persons for the training do not end after the synchronous sessions. The participants are encouraged to schedule consultation meetings with our mentors, with our resource persons, to help them develop their projects together with the community members. And then we also had special session where we link partners with other stakeholders for support. So what has been achieved? We've already had 3 batches of Reboot. First, we had 21 participants. 19 of them graduated and 9 out of them are women. 32 participants for batch 3. And 30 of them graduated and 11 of them are women. And for batch 3, 27 participants, 9 of them are women. And these 27 participants already include our community partner representatives. So listed here are also some of the projects that are already implemented or are being implemented and adopted by our community partners. So most of them are involving solar power. And some of them are regarding livelihood projects like biocharcoal and having a floating seaweed dryer with solar PV installation for the fishing communities. So we also partner with different communities. We have partners from fishing areas. We have partners from mountainous areas. We have partners from cities with urban setting. So these are very diverse concerns, and the participants are able to develop different kinds of projects within these different kinds of areas. One major output also or achievement of Reboot is the formation of the Reboot Philippines as an institute. This is an initiative of our alumni. This year, they were able to formally establish this as an organization. And we've been doing several projects with them, and they've been partnering with other organizations too when it comes to their program development. So what are the prospects in the future? Reboot will continue to be conducted as a hybrid program. We have considered this very much because with the past year, our cost has lessened, and we were able to put the funding on more important aspects of the program instead of spending a lot on transportation and paying hotels. So with this, we were able to at least have initial projects implemented together with the partners. And then also, we've also started the Youth for Just Transitions Network, where the Reboot alumni are working with young labor unionists in the formation of the network. And soon we will also be engaging young farmer leaders. In the long run, we hope that the program, the Reboot program, will be adopted by local partners in the at least in the three major islands of the Philippines, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So we will be able to accommodate more participants and cover more partnership in the different areas, in the rural areas specifically. So that's it. Thank you very much. And yeah, these are the young dynamic people who lead the implementation of the Reboot program. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for the lovely talk. We will be calling upon our next speaker, and after that talk, we will throw open the stage for questions. So I'll invite Purnima Palekarji to introduce the next speaker. You're on mute.
Sorry for that. Our next talk is on climate change and energy transition. And our speaker is Dina Kisbi. Have I pronounced it right, ma'am? Yes, okay. She's a program manager at the FES Regional Climate and Energy Project, MENA. She has over 12 years of experience focusing on environmental, social impact assessment, climate change, and protecting the ozone layer. Starting her career in the private sector as an environmental specialist, shifting towards governmental work, being the focal point for UNFCCC and Montreal Protocol on behalf of Jordan, currently an activist and passionate civil society representative. So now I call upon ma'am to take over the session. Please welcome, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. Good day. And I do apologize for the delay, but I always mess up times. The time conversion for me is 0, so apologies. Will you allow me to share my screen, please?
Yes, in a minute.
Thank you. Yes, okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So first of all, thank you so much for giving me the chance to be with such distinguished, amazing colleagues from India, from all over the world. And thank you for giving me the chance to just shed some light on the work that's been done on the Middle East and North Africa region. So the title that I'm using this time is Laws of Attraction Employed in Climate Agendas in the MENA region. The reason I chose this is because the term laws of attraction is basically meaning that whatever you think about, believe strongly about, will come about. And I think the countries in the MENA region have been doing this exactly when it comes to climate and energy topics in the region. So for our program, it's the Climate and Energy Regional Program that focuses on the MENA region, which is the Middle East and North Africa. And we have 3 main pillars that we work on. Basically, we work on climate justice, just transition to renewable energy, and sustainable cities. Why are these terms so important? because, and if any of you was attending the COP this year, will understand the meaning and the need for climate justice, not just climate talks and climate negotiations, or just any shift towards renewable, because we need that shift to be just inclusive, and the term that we always use, leaving no one behind. And for the MENA region that is highly like susceptibly affected by climate change impacts, we need to work towards developing and actually making a change in the policies and the actual players in the game when it comes to climate and energy. So we work with institutions and different institutions. The reason that we focus on justice, because if you do it not in a just way, then it doesn't make sense for you to do it at all. So we need to make the statements right. We need to make our work that is poured into the right direction of whatever activities that needs to be done. So just to put you in the context of the MENA region, so first of all, the region faces a lot of political instability, wars in Yemen, in Syria, and Palestine, instability in Lebanon, Iraq. Sometimes all of these regions, the work in climate makes it more difficult, since there's this shift of political instability. So we have a lot of shortage in resources, especially water resources. Some of the region's countries are most vulnerable to being identified as the least countries with water potential and water capacity. Not just that, agricultural activities are being withdrawn and being lessened year by year. Our energy sources are most of our countries are importing their energy and their fuel. So they're dependent on other countries. There's the unfortunate lack of trust between the government, civil society, private sector. That lack of trust makes it hard sometimes to reach common ground and common interest when it comes to specific topics such as climate change. There's the big, what can I call it? The big beast, the economy. Because whenever you talk environment, everyone speaks of economy. Like we have elevated poverty rates, we have massive unemployment rates in some countries reaching up to 12.5. And that's why in most of the cases in our region, environment and climate change are not on the top of the priorities of the government or the actual politicians working in the government, because all of the discussions go towards like, how can I improve my economy? How can I make up for that instability? How can I decrease the employment rates? But what we always discuss is that when you actually transition properly to renewables, when you're actually tackling climate agendas properly, you're generating green jobs. You're actually, there's the new terms that we always listen to, circular economy, proper management, inclusive management. And then in all of these, if properly implemented by the right players on the game, you actually can decrease the economic impacts and negative impacts on your countries. So how do we work as the FIAS? So as I said, unfortunately, there's this mistrust between the government and the civil society. So what we try to do is to bridge that gap and to build up these bonds in a neutral platform for everyone to discuss freely. Because if we don't talk to each other, nothing will be happening. So we talk on a national level, we talk on a regional level. So we work with government, we work with different governments, for example, the ministries that are involved in as focal points for the United Nations Framework Agreement for the Climate Change. We work with Ministry of Energy in several countries, because energy is a major topic when it comes to climate change and the mitigation aspect. We talk also to municipalities, because they are the on-ground implementers of the climate agendas. Not just that, then we go to civil society. We try all the time to build up their capacity and to bridge the gaps between how to deliver their perspective properly into the international arena, because we believe that the civil society is the actual embodiment of trust between locals and governments. So they need to be properly prepared to deliver these messages. We work with academics because the theoretical part needs to be implemented, yet the implementation sometimes requires more academic research to be taking place. Private sector, we believe in the engagement of the private sector. We work with consultancies. We have to focus at some point with banks because they have the potential to actually take climate agendas from paper to actual implementation at the national level. We work a lot with the industries because, for example, one of the new topics that we try to engage the industries in is the clean heat, that is like solar heating systems within industries. There's also trade unions. We believe that they need to take and step in this agenda, because if they don't, we're going to stand still. They need to be well equipped, prepared, and actually engaged in the process of this transition, because they need to speak up from a legal perspective, from an implementation perspective as well. In all of our work, we tackle vulnerable communities. Who are vulnerable communities? Like, we focus so much on gender, youth, refugees, people with disabilities. All of these, we have a lens in our projects just to ensure the inclusiveness of our projects and activities towards these vulnerable communities. How do we deliver? So the work of FES, we use several methodologies. So we do conferences. And as my colleague Renee said, like during COVID, maybe the online conferences gave us a chance to actually engage more people. Sometimes that hindrance of borders is not there anymore. To some extent, thanks to COVID, that we are doing some online conferences now, and we can engage so many colleagues and participants from all over the world. We do reports. Reports are done by practitioners, civil society, sometimes youth. So one of the papers that we really are so interested in and we focus on is youth perspective on the energy transition of the MENA region. So that document was written and delivered by youth. And it's perfect that you see what they think, how do they think, and what other options do they have in their mind. We use, so the technology also is in our advantage. So we do videos. People can maybe relate to visuals more than just like reading a report in some context. And just going back to reports, so we do them bilingual, usually Arabic and English. And if there's a need, we also do it in French, just to ensure that these reports reach up to the highest percentage of people who are interested. We will never use the language barrier as like a hanger to just choose that not to be engaged properly. We do roundtable discussions, not just with practitioners, we also do it with high level. We do it with government officials, we do it with civil society representatives, just to have that arena of informal discussion, just to reach out to a common ground. We do capacity building, because if you look, and sometimes most of the problems that are occurring due to just transition, or why we're not heading that way properly, or the climate change agenda, most of the time it's because they lack the capacity building. They lack the concepts when it's related to climate change. For example, recently we did a capacity building for practitioners and people who work at the municipality level. So the lesson that we learned and they learned is that during the training, they were like, we do this work, but we had no idea that it is climate change related, or it actually like falls into the climate agenda or the energy transition. They do a lot of work on ground when it comes to agriculture, to water conservation, to energy efficiency. There are so many of these teeny details that they had no idea that this is climate change and energy transition related, and they didn't know how to report on that. So basically, we need just to let them know how, and just to tick that tag that this isn't actually like related to sustainability, related to SDGs, related to climate change. We also do podcasts. So the podcast is that the fact that it's flexible gives it an advantage. So we cover a lot of stories, initiatives, activities that are happening in the MENA region, and we try to make them as easy to hear and listen to as possible, so that you can actually engage a wider audience to be in the process of that transition. So if you allow me to just point out some of the work that we are doing. So we have our annual Sustainable Cities Conference. This year we had it online due to COVID restrictions. We focused on the social justice when it comes to urban planning. We focused on green infrastructures and how they can actually help towards achieving the set goals on the city level. We shared experiences from all over the region. We had the inclusive transport section. And what is so interesting in this conference is that minus the differences and the challenges that cities are facing, towards some extent, we are all similar. We have so many common challenges. Yeah, that's why so many common approaches to solve these problems. So that shared experience, that shared knowledge is massive input towards the planning and the actual implementation of projects. So what was wrongly done, for example, in Rabat in Morocco, it doesn't have to be replicated in Egypt or in Amman, for example, in Jordan. So these shared experiences of actual achievements or actual achievements or bad things happening, it's perfect that they are shared in a context that it's in a neutral platform. And this is, I think, where the strong point of us is there, that we gained the trust of all those who are engaged. So we have the trust of the government, we have the trust of the civil society, for the locals. So they come in to share just like for the best interest of everyone. It's not just like to pinpoint or shame and blame of anyone. It's just that we are there to focus on how to actually solve our problems. We also work, one of our main partners is Climate Action Network Arab World, which is basically an umbrella for all civil society organizations in the region. And we try to work towards having them more vocal when it comes to climate justice and when it comes to just transition. We do capacity building, we engage them in the international conferences. We try to have that dialogue of civil society organizations from Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Djibouti, Jordan, just all of them to discuss how can they be better when it comes to climate agendas. For the energy transition, we work a lot with the countries. So I'm just going to give like some examples, if you allow me. So one of the projects that we work on with the Wuppertal Institute is basically the energy transition within the countries. So basically it works on 4 levels. So takeoff of renewable energy, then we system integration, then power to fuel, and then final result of 100% renewable. So what are we basically doing? We're actually investigating country by country how they can actually do their energy transition. Sometimes it's not easy when you're actually embedded in the work on daily basis and routines to see how you can actually shift. So we give that approach of defining the legal framework, the institutional framework, the actual opportunities, challenges, and how to actually process through these 4 phases, all the way towards reaching 100% renewable energy. Not just that, always try to investigate new trends. So I mentioned, for example, the solar heating system for industry, but currently we're also working on green hydrogen. This is the new topic that everyone is working on. And us as FES were the pioneer at the region to actually open the space for the discussion. We had several meetings, we had several reportings. Recently, we had a high-level dialogue of decision makers in the region just to come in and discuss how they are taking the green hydrogen within their agenda, strategies, and actual energy mix. And in a lot of the countries, for example, in Jordan, they decided based on our trainings and capacity building that they need a high-level committee to be formed so that they can discuss how to properly engage in new trends of technologies and extra new trends of energy, such as green hydrogen. So we see that as a success. At least we are opening doors for those institutions and countries to investigate new transport. We focus a lot on transport. It's not just transport. We need it to be an inclusive transport, meaning that everyone should be engaged in the process. Everyone should be able to use transport. We talk about electric vehicles, but then again, we need for a comprehensive, currently on a gender action plan for transport in Amman, for example. We worked on adding a lens on gender when it comes to public transport, and the results were amazing. For example, in Jordan, 47% of women tend to refuse job opportunities due to the lack of proper inclusive transport systems. In other countries, they are also lacking when it comes to harassment, when it comes to lighting, to CCTV, the actual like last mile. We always think of A to B, then how can I get to C? All of this we try to shed light on and have that proper infrastructure embedded within the systems. For urban and spatial justice, this was evident during COVID. Like during COVID and the lockdown, as Renee said, we discovered so much that we lacked, yet we saw where our strong points are. So urbanists and urban planners, their role became evident, and that role related to social justice during COVID-19. For example, the location of your house, how like conveniently it's located on a walking distance to a hospital, to center, to a grocery store, to all these basic needs, a pharmacy. So that was just like the light bulb that urban planners are a massive contributors to the actual planning and justice, spatial justice for the residents. And one of the studies that we are really interested in is that like how neighborhoods prove to be the main pillar for a resilient city. So by embedding the spatial justice and actual urban planning properly within a neighborhood, you can actually facilitate the fact that the whole city can become a resilient city. And God forbid, if anything happens on the long run, hopefully we'll be done with COVID, hopefully we will not have any other pandemics. But if that's the case, we need to learn our lesson of how to properly engage in a process that's inclusive and can define and meet the needs of the residents of the city. We also work on green building codes, how to have our building codes. It's either new building codes, like for the new buildings, or retrofitting systems. And that should be, that we're doing that on different levels. We do it with the government, we do it also recently, we are developing animated movies, just to show how easy it is to just maybe invest a little bit in your newly constructed house or retrofit your already existing house to have it more energy efficient, more sustainable, and more cost effective. And that's, I think, the main point. Like sometimes you just mention the money and people will just follow. So this is just generally what we're doing in the MENA region. And I thank you very much. And I'm definitely open for any questions and any discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dina. And thank you, Renee, also for the fantastic talks. I think it's great again that you're connecting so many of the different aspects that are the sort of cornerstones of equity that is important. And I love the word attraction. Usually it's used in a very different context, so it immediately catches attention. So I think sometimes it's semantics, and the words have a lot of power to draw attention to that. There was a question that Rahul had asked in the chat that was for Renee. If Renee would like to add, his question was, does Reboot work as well in hybrid format as compared to in the original format? So Renee, besides the answer that you've written, would you like to add anything, or I can read out the answer for everyone?
Yeah, I'm not adding anything.
Okay.
Regard the answer to that.
Sure. So Reboot is supposed to be an experimental training program. The immersion program will still be a part of the hybrid method lectures inputs. We will just do this via sync or asynchronous methods, but there will be still a face-to-face method for some workshops and for immersion. And the second question is, what is green hydrogen and how green is it?
Is it okay if I answer?
Yes, please, Dina. Okay.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. And this is a new debate that everyone is talking about, and not just green, blue, and they come up with so many names for hydrogen. But the basic concept of it is that, like hydrogen, the use of H2O, which is water, the basic concept is that you use a renewable energy source to actually separate the atoms, and that hydrogen atom has an enormous amount of energy that can be used in a very sustainable, renewable manner. So where's the trick here? The trick is that one, it's a new technology, so we need to investigate it more. But still, it's a renewable source of energy that supposedly it feeds on its own. So the particulate is there, the H2O is there, the H molecule is there, so we can just like embed that powerful source into your systems. And it's not just like, for example, what we always say about solar energy, that we can only use it during the daytime. But the why aren't people are so much engaged in it? Because again, it's a new technology. Second of all, it requires a lot of energy in order for you to produce energy. So that's the debate of like, to what extent can I actually use my renewable energy resources to produce another resource of energy that is sustainable? And in countries, for example, in the MENA region, to what extent can you actually value energy over water resources? Because let's face it, our countries are facing major shortage in water. So that's the debate still. But countries are actually engaging. So for example, in Jordan, there's a new contract for green hydrogen development. In Morocco, they've been pioneering in this. United Arab States are also engaging in this. Egypt is investigating the potential for it. So that's the beauty of the MENA region. They never step back from a new experiment. They try always to be engaged in the process in the meaning of a positive input and not just hindering the processes. To some extent, maybe we lack in the research and development, and we always wait for the technology transfer, but we also try to investigate it and tailor it to our own needs and basic concepts. And that's exactly what green hydrogen is all about. I'm sorry if there's another question, is there?
Yeah. Hi, Dina. Hi. This is Manvi here. And I actually wanted to ask you, because you work in a lot of countries where they don't have democratic government. The challenges of working in such political dispensations, and how do you, what are your narratives to engage with them?
Thank you so much for that question. And I totally agree. Sometimes we are hindered and we are put in so many challenges of how to actually engage on the local level. Sometimes we do it theoretically, and I confess. But so what we're trying to do is that the beauty of our organization as Friedrich-Ebert and Climate Energy Regional Project is that we managed throughout the years to gain the respect and actual trust of all entities working in the climate and energy, in the context that the government actually trusts FIAS, civil society trusts FIAS. So we always try to be neutral, that we believe that everyone is actually talking and trying to work for the best interests of their countries. Yet again, the concepts of the dialogues are different, and that's why we try to unify. Now, when it comes to political disturbances, it's always a problem, to be honest. In some of the cases, in some countries, sometimes we are banned to actually work there, or we can't actually work there. What we try to do is to find those, let's call them heroes on ground. We try to build up their capacity in order for them to deliver the messages on our behalf. This is one. Two, I always say maybe COVID to some extent gave us the potential of reaching people who we could not reach before through technologies. Now that sometimes backfires at us because the potential of technology is not the same within different countries. Some of them, they don't have the basic infrastructure for internet and to keep up, but we try to do that and embed them with that. We also try to, when we do reports, we never do them from like a theoretical perspective. We get someone engaged within the country to write and to develop, investigate, and put that into writings, because whatever we say, we don't know how things are done on a country level, on a basic concept, on a day-to-day basic interactions with the government, with the civil society. But for us also, we do believe there's this freedom with the civil society that's a lot better than the government's freedom. They have larger scale, larger space to maneuver, to talk, to discuss in a non-political way. And that's why we always believe in science. And well, let's say science is something that everyone agrees upon. So if you get the facts right, the capacity building right, open channels between those different sectors, and this is what we always try to do, you can reach somewhere. And again, like using different methods of delivering these messages. It doesn't have to be face-to-face all the time. We can just like, again, platforms, podcasts, videos, these messages needs to be delivered to everyone. And those champions and heroes, especially youth, like there's so much potential in the youth, because first of all, they have the energy, they will be the ones impacted. They need to pick up the flag after us. So you need to build up their capacities in a proper way that they can actually deliver the messages on a long run with their governments and their actual communities. So this is exactly like what we try to do. It's not easy, but to some extent we try our best to do it.
Thank you so much, Tina, for those interesting insights. Also, these are certain solutions that I think most of the countries here can employ, even in democratic setups. We know that, it's not easy to engage with governments sometimes, and because the visions are so, poles apart.
Sure. And if you allow me just to add one more thing. Sometimes, like as I said, for me personally, the easiest segment to work with is the private sector, because as easy as is, if you talk money, they will listen. But unfortunately,
you said that it was such a
honestly
smart input. Yeah.
But the thing is, like, unfortunately, sometimes we need to change our dialogue in the context of everyone says, like, we need to take care of our economy. Fair enough. I totally agree. But who says if we actually transition properly to renewable energy, if we have proper embedment of climate change agendas and SDGs, who says that we're not creating jobs? On the contrary, we're actually creating more green, sustainable jobs. And that's how the dialogue should take place. Like we are not in any way or any intention trying to deprive people of their economical values or economical inputs and actual incomes. On the contrary, we're trying to compensate and have that, like, let's say we always say that word, just climate justice for everyone. It doesn't have to be like just a separate segment of people who are benefiting while others are actually struggling. So these new trends needs to be in the dialogue for people to get more engaged, to realize the potential of how to shift towards more sustainable economy and green economies, green job, green growth, and all of these items, they should be in the discussion now, from now on. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. No problem, Dina. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you also, Renee. I think you brought in a very crucial, also international flavor to the discussions. It also exposes a lot of people here to what is happening around the globe. In Asia or in MENA region. And I think there are a lot of learnings here that we would also try to adapt in our programs. I see, there are a lot of synergies that can be built with these programs, especially for the program that we carry out in India. So thank you so much for joining us. It was great having you here, and I hope you can stay for the next sessions as well, because from this we will transition to an open forum on climate change policy. And I think there as well, national and international, both perspectives are very important to address. And for this session, we have invited Julia Behrens to give us the initial input. Julia Behrens is the Project Director of Climate and Energy in Asia at Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, located in Vietnam. The project supports partner organizations in working towards the socio-ecological transformation in Asia. And I must mention here that the work that we do in India as well, a big part of it also is supported by this project in Asia. Before joining FES, Julia drove environmental narratives and power structures and worked as a consultant for various organizations on intersectional feminism. She holds degrees in environment, culture, and communication from the University of Glasgow and in Southeastern Asian Studies from Humboldt University, Berlin, and has spent time studying and working in Vietnam, Thailand, and the US. Welcome, Julia, again. We've been in with breakout sessions off and on, but a pleasure to welcome you formally to the conference. And over to you for your inputs on climate change policy, after which we hope we will open the floor for discussions among participants as well. And we have a few experts here whom we would like to hear as well, but first looking forward to your input.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much to my colleagues, Dina and Renee, who've spoken before me and already managed to convey a lot of the messages that are important to Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung. I will try to keep my remarks brief to allow some time for discussion and also hear some more input from all of the participants, because what I also noticed throughout the program so far that we have so much expertise here. So thank you very much for the organizing committee to bringing all these great people together in this conference. So before I start explaining some of my thoughts on the issue of climate change policy, I would like to ask everyone to share some words, some associations they have with climate change policy that come up to their mind. So if you wouldn't mind, just type some words, spontaneous associations, thoughts you have into the chat box. Does it exist? Good point. Climate finance, renewable energy. It's tough. Yes, definitely. Disoriented. Disoriented might refer to the COP, what we've seen over the last 2 weeks. Visibility, nowhere. Accountability, biofuel. Yes. All these are some really good associations. Misaligned and lack of accountability. You're also following the COP. Okay, great. So I see that you all have some negative observations of what is actually happening at the moment, but also there is hope and some vision in your associations of what climate change policy should look like. So maybe to start off, to ask the question, what is policy actually? What do we mean when we speak about policy? Policies are sets of guidelines. It can be laws, it can be plans, it can be ideas that regulate behavior in a certain situation. And these laws and guidelines are agreed upon by a group of people. It can be a government, but it can also be an organization. It can be a different assembly of different actors on different scales and levels. So basically it is some rules a certain group should stick to, in our case, in regard to fighting the climate crisis that is on our doorstep. There are different schools of ideas and thoughts on how important government policies are in meeting with the current challenges of the climate crisis. Some school of thoughts believe that governments are the key actors in strategies to fight climate change, while others believe that governments only set a certain framework, but that other actors, for example, the economy or individuals, citizens, or even consumers are the ones who are crucial for climate change policies. At Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, we believe that there is no way out of the climate crisis without state policies and government intervention, but also that these guidelines have to ensure that we stay below 1.5 degrees of global warming, and at the same time safeguard marginalized groups and carry with them not only ecological implications, but they also should be socially responsible. What my colleague Dina just mentioned, we try to work towards climate justice and a just transition in the energy sector so that current inequalities existing in the world are not perpetuated through policies trying to curb climate change. So, for example, this could mean that a transition away from coal and towards renewable energy We have to include workers' rights in our thoughts and into policy, and support people who might lose their job because of the phase out of fossil fuels, in acquiring necessary skills to get jobs within the renewable energy sector. Globally, being for a just transition or just transformation means that the countries who have contributed most to climate change, they must support the countries who have not contributed to climate change as much, and support them to develop in a sustainable way and in their own understanding of development. So not approaching countries and say you have to become like we are, which has been a notion very present in the development discourse, but instead ask, what do you need, and support them needs-based and global policies. So we also need to not only have like one global policy for everyone, but adjust the policies for climate change based on different contexts and based on different needs from different social groups. Policies can range from carbon tax over a ban of fossil fuels, incentives for people and businesses to become more environmentally friendly through tax or through other incentives, investing in public transport, for example, in cities, banning cars from cities, ideally that goes hand in hand, investing in research and also investing in communication about climate change, just as a few examples for policies. Now, when we look at the policies, we need to reflect on who's actually making them. What we also see at the COP, or what we've spoken out earlier in the yin-yang session on gender and community, is that the group of people who are making policies that affect others are a rather homogeneous group. It's mostly men. It's mostly men that come from a certain economic and social background. And this has implications on what policies look like. And if we would open up the floor of policymaking and try to include much more diverse groups into it, give them access to and representation to policymaking, this can also change what comes out of it, of the policymaking process in the end. Just as an example, as Wanvi mentioned, I'm based in Vietnam, and last year we had a really big disaster of floods in central Vietnam, which at that time had been much more severe than actually the COVID pandemic here. And the board of the government who decided on what disaster aid need to be delivered to the communities affected most heavily by the floodings, it was 100% male. And as a result, the people, the communities in the flood areas, they didn't get any female hygiene products because men just didn't think that that was, like, it didn't even come to their mind that this was necessary, right? So if a woman would have been on the board, then it would have been more likely that women also would have gotten access to female hygiene products in this difficult situation. And that's not only true for women and men, this is true for much more for social economic status, for LGBTIQ groups, for disabled people, and much more. But of course, representation in policymaking is not everything. I mean, if we look, for example, at the US, we have a vice president who's a woman of color, Kamala Harris, but still she's implementing policies that are horrendous for migrant women. So representation is an important part, but it's not everything. At the same time, we need to also guarantee access to resources on community levels. And we also need to change narratives to understand what is going on from different points of views. So just to wrap my thoughts up and give the floor over to everyone in this room, is that we need to tackle the climate crisis, our policies in many sectors, It starts with energy policy, it's transportation, it's infrastructure, research, agriculture, and many more. It is a huge task, but it is also a chance to build a world that is not only ecologically sustainable, but which we can seek to strengthen marginalized groups towards a social and ecological transformation. And challenges to achieve that is to build, as I also mentioned in her presentation before, as we need governments, CSOs, businesses, all on board together for such a huge challenge and a huge transformation. And we also need to acknowledge that we need a change in our really basic systems, which means talking about power structures, which will not be easy, of course. So these are my thoughts on the issue of climate change policy. And I'm looking forward to hear what your response to that is, or if you would like to add anything.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you so much. I think you've given a very nice overview of, why we need the policy, what kind of policies are required, who is making the policy, and for whom, which is really important, which is often, overlooked in policy making. Some things are, I feel, perpetually missing, and nobody's taking cognizance of these things. I would at this point like to bring in Rishi Agarwal, because Rishi is also commenting here on the chat, and I think there are certain things that Rishi feels that are missing from policy making, which needs to be addressed immediately. Let me quickly introduce Rishi. He founded the Mumbai Sustainability Center in 2016 after more than 15 years of active involvement with Mumbai's environmental issues. Mumbai Sustainability Center also founded Safai Bank program as a solution for extended producer responsibility in multi-layered packaging waste. It's a very, it's an out of the box, practice, and we've been also using that as one of the best practices to create awareness and also trying to bring scale to it through some green financing and stuff. But Rishi, what are your responses to Julia's or input, or what would you like to add here?
Yeah, thanks Madhvi for inviting me. That comment which I put in the chat box was specifically when Julia was at one section where she almost sounded apologizing from the industrialist west side towards the non-industrialized side. And I should just give a kind of a background that for almost 20 years, I've been at a polar end of India's climate change policy, which is common but differentiated responsibility. I've been a very vocal critique of Sunita Narayan. I think she refuses to even engage in a discussion on the points which I want to make. But I'm completely opposed of what started in 1991, actually, from an original article by Anil Agarwal and Sunita Narayan, which was climate justice, or this whole idea of equity. And unfortunately, what is happening in India is that the most heavy consumers of energy are the ones who are firing bullets from the shoulders of the most marginalized. And in the name of the most marginalized, we want to ensure that our carbon budget keeps expanding, where we keep doing absolutely wrong practices, absolutely wrong lifestyles, the same wasteful lifestyles which have been prevalent in America or Europe for the past 100 years. The Indian elite wants to now follow those lifestyles. Which is why they are influencing the transport policy towards more car-oriented policy, building, and the same people have hijacked India's climate policy, not for the poorest in India, but for their own carbon budget, so that they know that it shouldn't keep shrinking. So I think that is when I interjected with that part. And unfortunately, I think the COP talk, the whole COP process is completely hijacked by corporate interests. It is no longer in the overall interest of the planet. It is purely interest of the corporate sector, and it's just a kind of in fact, I refuse to participate with it also. I think it's a waste of energy for millions of people to participate in that process. I think all action should be local. I think people should fight the climate battle at the level of their municipal corporation. It has got nothing to do with what happens in Glasgow or Copenhagen or Paris. It is in the interest of the city to fight for a better, more equitable transport system, a better waste management system, better housing policy, better employability, etc. Those things have got nothing to do with what happens with the UN or COP. And unfortunately, we don't see the same youth in Mumbai who will be participating very enthusiastically in a Glasgow. Just to give you an example, I won't take long. Exactly a month back, we launched a campaign to declare a National Pedestrian Day so that we can focus on improving pedestrian infrastructure around the country. We started an online petition and it's got such a terrible response. I mean, we are trying to get maybe 100,000, 500,000 signatures, 1 million signatures. And here we have a piddly, I don't know what's the latest count, but maybe 10,000 signatures. And which means that we want more people to be participating, make our cities pedestrian and cycling and public transport friendly. And it has got nothing to do with what happens in Glasgow. It's got nothing to do with even climate change, I would say. There is a climate change impact, but like my favorite term has been co-benefit. Nobody uses the term co-benefit at all. If you have improved sustainable mobility solutions, you have benefits which are here and now. Forget what will happen in 2050 or whether Tuvalu will go under the sea or Bombay will go under the sea. But if you have, and transportation sector has such huge, now India cannot say that no, in America, they built the expressways in the 1940s and the highway campaign and all of that. And Mr. Gadkari will keep giving that example and say, no, we need to first do that. And then we will talk something else. I mean, I think it's ridiculous. So I think that's why I said, I mean, we don't discuss the, so 70% of the needs are going to remain constant, whether it's somebody staying in a Berlin, in a Copenhagen, in a New York, in a London, or in Mumbai, or in a Bihar, in Azamgarh, or Gorakhpur, or Patna, or wherever, back of the beyonds. But 70% of human existence is going to be the same. How we shape that, there cannot be any disagreement about that. There has to be energy efficiency in London. The energy efficiency in London will be much different from energy efficiency in Gorakhpur. But you cannot say that as a principle, it's 100%. It's going to be applicable to the whole globe. So I think that's just when, I mean, we can keep going speaking. I don't want too much time.
No, thank you, Rishi. I know these are uncomfortable questions, but these have to be asked because, otherwise we carry on with business as usual. Also, as social development sector people, we carry on with the usual narratives and, sometimes lose sight of what, is happening on the periphery. So thank you for raising this. And I think when you were talking about, fighting the battles, I think we have just the right person here, Advocate Lara Jesani. She's been fighting many battles for us, I think, as for citizens. She's a practicing lawyer in Indian courts for over a decade and is currently an independent litigator with her primary practice based out of Bombay High Court and National Green Tribunal. She takes up cases of human rights violation, in particular constitutional, environmental development, and anti-corruption matters in the defense of human rights defenders. Also, particularly, she represents project-affected communities and CSOs in matters pertaining to environmental concerns and violation. Lara, how do you see the COP process? I know we've been talking whether or not it is of any use, and how do you see these battles maybe forming up in the future, or whether those have, the right ammunition to be fighting these battles?
See, I'm equally critical of the entire COP process, and I don't think I'm not saying that these discussions are not important. And I think having a global understanding of what's happening, as well as setting out with measures to combat climate change in different ways is very important. But how are these processes actually conducted? For any global climate change policy to be effective, it is very important at this stage to look at, its implementation, to look at whether it's actually going to make an impact at a local level, whether, whether governments are going to respect this policy, whether the process of coming up with this policy itself is correct or not. I mean, some of the points have already raised, by Julia. is this process inclusive? Is it guided by voices of women, of persons with disabilities, persons who are coming from affected communities? Do we have like Dalits, Adivasis, denotified tribes? They are the ones who are actually even facing the impacts of disasters at a local level. They are the ones who are already at the receiving end of climate change. What are we talking about? Bombay going down in 2050? We are communities which are getting destroyed as we speak. We've seen more flood events than ever before. We've seen, massive amounts of, issues with water. We've had soil erosion. We've had disasters in Uttaranchal and many of the places that earlier did not see the same kind of disaster. And these are all a result of destructive development activities that have taken place over time. And to facilitate it, we also have, a domestic policy that has been steadily weakened. We've seen dilution of policies in the last few years like never before. So when we do talk about like very, very, progressive climate change policies at a global level, where are we at the domestic level? How does the domestic policy really look? We are at a time when, we have amendments being introduced, at least a consultation paper has been brought out. We don't even know what the actual amendments are going to be, bringing in, very drastic changes to the Forest Conservation Act. We have the draft EIA 2020 notification, which was brought in last year. It has been reintroduced now with 22, language translation. And the last date for giving comments is December 15th. Considering that, 2 million comments had been received from civil society objecting to the notification, one would have hoped that, it would have been withdrawn, amended, looked at differently, but now it's being brought out again in the same form in 2021. So we're looking, not just this, even our mining policies have been changed, our labor policies have been changed, FRA is not being implemented, the Forest Rights Act, the same thing with PESA. The object behind all of these acts that were community oriented, that spoke of public participation, that brought in, the question of consultation, of prior notification, which are the international environmental policies that are being discussed in all of these international forums, are actually being taken away at the domestic level. So how are we even, and then how do we also look at, whether the Paris Agreement has been successful or not, whether it has been implemented or not, how are we assessing, how are we putting the, governments to task? I mean, how are we assessing whether India has performed well? I mean, all of these are faulty at so many levels. So, I don't think that complete disengagement is the solution. I mean, I differ there. I feel that it is very important for us to assert our claim, to stake our space in these negotiations and discussions, to demand accountability, to demand solutions that are, that we can actually see on the ground, right? And for that, it is very important that these discussions are community-led. What's happening right now is this entire top-down approach doesn't even reach us in so many ways, right? It has to be the other way around. And we have to demand, implementation, compliance, monitoring. We have to demand mandatory and binding frameworks. Because right now, the only talk taking place in most of these spaces, whether they are whether they are the business and human rights space, or whether it is, on a lot of different forums on environment, or whether it is on, on solutions which are being presented in terms of biorenewable energies, and all of them are voluntary. Where is the mandatory framework? Where are we talking about binding treaties and agreements, where if the business does not perform, it does not, ensure that their carbon energy use, if it does not, shift, they cannot continue to do their business. I mean, where is that? Where are these? Where is the justice when we have issues of violations? So access to justice is also at its lowest. I mean, I'm just wrapping up, but I just want to leave a thought with everyone. National green tribunals have not been functioning since 2016. The regional benches have not been here. We've seen, more because of the pandemic for the last 2 years, we haven't even seen the higher courts take up environmental cases. So where is this justice? We have to ask very hard questions, and we have to take a practical assessment of what's going on. We can talk policy level, we can talk it's an endless discussion. And and like you said, these are uncomfortable questions that we're all raising, but we have to be able to assess things as they are. We have to look at the local situation. We have to look at what's going on the ground, in our courts, in our independent institutions, and try and assess where our performance lies. So this is, I think, a very critical stage for us to raise these questions, and also to stake our claim to being very important defining factors in these negotiations and discussions that are taking place. We need to bridge that gap, and all of this is going to affect us. So it's really we who are at stake. It's our immediate environment, it's us, it's our family, it's our friends, it's our localities that are at stake. And that's why I think it's very important for us to claim that stake.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Lara. And also, I also feel that, like we also do it in our work, that there is a lot of commitment in intention. There are a lot of intentions, maybe right or maybe misplaced, but maybe right. But what one really needs is commitment in action. And unless until it boils down to implementation and action, even of, we always say that India has best of policies, but if they are not implemented, they are not good. If there is no, monitoring mechanism, if there are no checks and balances, then best of the policies are no good for us. And I think for every walk of life, be it gender equality, or be it workers' rights, or be it climate justice, we are facing the problem of commitment in action from, I won't say it's just the government, but it's also, all of us as individuals as well. The floor is actually open for anyone who would like to make a comment and talk from their perspective or from a stakeholder group that they are representing. I saw that there were a few questions in the chat box which have already been addressed. So I think it would be nice if people can just speak up what they're thinking or what their thoughts are about policy. Yes, Rishi.
Yeah, I was when Lara was mentioning that possibly in response to my point also of rubbishing the COP process, but the whole idea is that I think we are disproportionately engaging maybe at these even forget global, even in India, we seem to have too much of discussions happening at Delhi level, etc. Whereas I think the whole process, whether at Delhi or at COPs, will become so much more stronger. And we are at the almost 30th anniversary of the 73rd, 74th Amendment, where the whole idea was dissolution of power right till the lowest, this thing, Gram Panchayat and Zilla Parishad level. I work with so many Gram Panchayats in the Mumbai region itself on waste management. What a pathetic state of affairs. And then from that same state, the environment minister goes to Glasgow and gets an award that this is a state which is doing great work on climate change. Where is the great work? You come in Mumbai, within a 100-kilometer radius, I'll show you whether transportation policy, whether road safety, whether waste management, whether liquid, solid, anything, whether industrial emissions, industrial waste. And we are not having that discussion within a Mumbai metropolitan region, or look at the air pollution in Delhi. I mean, the least we can do is to prevent 1 lakh or maybe 10 lakh wrappers from going to Ghazipur and Bandwadi. But on a daily basis, we are sending waste over there that is getting burnt over there. So I think the more we are stronger at the foundation, I mean, if you have to make that pyramid, then all the big work is at the base of the pyramid. Right now, we can't be creating that pinnacle of the pyramid and think of something. We really don't have any base to this whole COP process, I feel. That's why it keeps collapsing.
Sure. Anyone else? Anyone else would like to say something?
Yeah, I would like to. Hello.
Hi, Anastasia.
Hi.
Yes,
Can I just say something?
Sure.
Yeah, if you're talking of whatever policies or changes, if you see, just take an example of Delhi today. The way, oh, okay. Actually, I'm just in the vehicle. So I don't know. Okay. Can I just, sorry. So if we take an example of Delhi today, from what we are seeing, the kind of pollution level that has gone up, and yet we are there at Glasgow, I mean, just blowing our own trumpets. So what is it that we are really talking about? I agree with the other participants who said, and Rishi sir, that it's really a very bad scenario. And if our policymakers who know nothing about ground realities are the ones who are going to be the ones implementing it, then Delhi is the biggest example today of the tiff between the central and the local government. So till these tiffs continue, I don't think we are going to head anywhere. So it is we, the stakeholders, the people who need to be stronger now and make them accountable in the coming times. It is only then that we can achieve, and very small baby steps that India needs to take first instead of really talking big.
Sure, thank you. I totally agree with you. We are a population of 1 billion, and even if one of us, each one of us take like single small step, it's going to make a huge difference. And also India, at least at the international level, has been talking about, environmental stewardship. I think this
I mean, yes, we are.
The government doesn't step up, then we can definitely, as citizens, we can definitely step up to.
Definitely. I mean, change begins with me, is what I should first talk about.
Absolutely agree with you. I think with that, we can close the session, and thank you so much.
I just wanted to come in here.
Sure.
See, when we say that the change begins with me, and we need to do a lot at the individual level, I think it's also about how we are going to continue to monitor the policy, how we are going to raise uncomfortable questions, how much we are going to have as a critical engagement with the government in terms of the kind of policy changes that they are bringing about. I think there are a few different issues. One is, of course, the one of non-implementation of existing policy. The second is the manner in which the existing policies are implemented, like the faulty procedures. And the third thing which is there is how the policy itself is being dismantled. So that all these three spaces, I think that since we are talking about policy and we are in a session which is dedicated to policy, I think that becomes very, very crucial for us to understand how we need to engage at all these three levels. So our participation, in critical engagement is very crucial, because we have to demand, accountability, and we have to ensure that our criticisms with respect to the manner in which development is being proceeded with, the very definition of development, being faulty right now, and the manner in which, these various indicators of environmental deterioration are coming up in front of us and they're not being dealt with, I think is crucial. And that is where we have to contribute at an individual level. But there is a lot that the state has to do. And there is a lot that we have to make the businesses do. So we must not we must not forget that this accountability that we are demanding is of the state, and that this, respect for the rights that we are demanding is from the businesses. So we can't shift everything onto us. What we can do is we can make them perform. That is, I just wanted to bring that into context when we were having this discussion.
Yeah. No, I didn't mean that we have to do everything, because in any case, I feel that we are doing everything. And, this whole thing about, I also have a very strong objection to when people say that, when Mumbai floods are there, or Chennai floods are there, or Kashmir floods are there, that people were so resilient and, they brought about, the community helped and this and that. And it really agitates me. And I feel that, it is not citizens, it's not for citizens to be resilient all the time and to be tackling everything by themselves when we have like an elected machinery in place who should be actually stepping up and doing this, and in the first place ensuring that such things don't happen. So yes, totally with you on this. But I do feel that the government and the state has the duty to provide the framework within which we can perform, and that we need their stronger involvement there. Closing remarks from Julia, and then we will close the session.
Thank you. I actually also again lowered my hand because Lara said was what I actually also wanted to say, that yes, the individual level can be important, but it's in a really mutual relationship with the systemic level, and both, like if one is missing, we cannot achieve like real change. And sometimes, I mean, Rishi already mentioned my apologetic choice of words earlier. And that is also something I feel a little apologetic about, is coming from Germany, is to have brought this narrative of individualism being the solution for all into the world. And I think we need to understand that unless the people in power and the power, which is the system of power, does not change, then it won't matter if we take a flight to our holidays or not.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Rishi. Thank you, Lara. Thank you, Anasuya, for sharing your experience and also your opinions here. I think it's given us a lot of food for thought. Also, I think some some stirring would have happened amongst the participants, and I hope that we can engage with further on these topics. With that, I would like to close the session, and I hand it over to Anand or Rahul.